The crystal palace of Valera Prime glowed under 3 moons. Its towers reached toward the sky like frozen flames, beautiful and cold. Inside those walls, the most powerful beings in the galaxy had gathered for one purpose. Princess Elindra was choosing a husband. Ships from 12 different species filled the landing platforms. Each delegation brought their finest princes, dukes, and heirs. They carried gifts worth more than entire planets. They wore armor that could stop starship weapons. They spoke with voices trained to command armies. Ambassador Patricia Lane stood at the window of the human quarters and watched them arrive. Earth's delegation was small. Their ship, the USS Meridian, looked like a cargo vessel compared to the golden warships of the Cathvari Empire. "We shouldn't even be here," said Commander Gregory Shaw. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. "Earth is nothing to offer these people. We're barely a century into space travel. They've been out here for thousands of years." Patricia turned from the window. "We were invited." Commander refusing would have been worse. Being humiliated is better. A soft tap on a data pad interrupted them. Both turned to look at Lieutenant Daniel Cole, who sat in the corner of the room. He held up his small screen. Words appeared on it. "We can still learn from watching." Daniel was 32 years old, quiet in a way that made people forget he was there. He had brown hair that was always a little messy and eyes that noticed everything. 6 months ago, an explosion during a diplomatic mission had damaged his throat. The doctor said his voice would heal, but it was taking time. For now he spoke through his data pad, typing faster than most people could talk. Gregory shook his head. "Learning won't help us when the Kthvari decide Earth is too weak to exist." Patricia raised her hand. "Enough. We're here as observers and cultural liaison." "Daniel, you'll handle translations if needed." "Gregory, keep our security team alert but invisible. We smile, we watch, and we go home without making enemies." Daniel nodded and returned to his reading. He had downloaded everything he could find about Valoran culture. Their history fascinated him. They were telepaths who could read emotions through physical touch. Their princess had rejected 47 suitors over 3 cycles because she could feel the truth hiding behind their pretty words. He wondered what it felt like to know someone's real heart just by touching their hand. This election ceremony began the next morning. The great hall was filled with light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Thousands of Valorans lined the walls in flowing robes of silver and blue. At the center of everything sat Emperor Valdris on a throne made of living crystal. Beside him stood his daughter. Princess Elindra was beautiful in a way that made the words seem too small. Her skin was pale violet, almost silver in certain light. Her eyes were completely white, without pupils, yet somehow warm. Her hair fell past her shoulders like liquid moonlight. But it was her presence that struck Daniel most. She carried herself like someone who had seen too much truth and was tired of it. One by one the suitors approached. The Cathvari prince came first. He was massive, covered in golden scales, and his voice shook the floor. When he spoke, "Princess Elindra, I offer you the strength of 10,000 warships. I offer you the wealth of the Cathvari treasury. I offer you my heart and my sword." He knelt and extended his hand. The hall fell silent as the princess reached down and touched his palm. For 3 Seconds nothing happened, then Princess Elindra pulled back as if burned. Her face showed no emotion, but her voice was ice. I see your heart. Prince Fourth, it holds contempt for those you consider lesser. You would use this alliance to crush the weak, not protect them. I reject you, the Cathari. Prince's scales flushed dark red with anger, but he could not argue. The selection was sacred law. He stepped back humiliated. The pattern repeated. Throughout the day, the Morvakian Duke offered rare minerals and promised peace. The princess touched his hand and found violent thoughts toward his own. Servants rejected. A nobleman from the Sinindari collective offered technology beyond human understanding. She sensed greed that would devour everything it touched. Rejected. Daniel watched from the back of the hall, fascinated and sad. Each suitor was powerful, wealthy and impressive. Each one hid something dark beneath their surface. He began to understand why the princess looked so tired. During a break in the ceremony, a young Valoran servant carrying ceremonial cups stumbled near the human delegation. The cups crashed to the floor, spilling blue liquid across the polished stone. The servant, barely more than a child, froze in terror. Mistakes during the selection could mean severe punishment. No one moved to help. The other delegations looked away, embarrassed or amused. Daniel stepped forward. He knelt beside the servant and began picking up the cups. The child stared at him with wide eyes. Daniel smiled and typed on his data pad. He showed the screen to the servant. Accidents happen. Let me help. Together they cleaned the mess. Daniel found a cloth in his pocket and wiped the floor. The servant whispered a thank you and hurried away. Daniel returned to his place without a word. He did not notice Princess Elandra watching from across the hall. Her wide eyes followed him as he disappeared back into the crowd of humans. She had seen many things that day: ambition, greed, anger, pride. This was the first time she had seen simple kindness. That night she stood on her balcony and looked down at the guest quarters. The human section was dark except for one small light. Through the window she could see a figure reading, the soft glow of a data pad illuminating his face. Her attendant approached. Your Highness, you should rest. Tomorrow brings more suitors. More of the same, Elindra said softly. Tell me about the human delegation. They are unimportant, Highness, a young species with little power. Their ambassador is clever but desperate. Their military officer is suspicious of everyone, and they have a translator who cannot speak. His voice was damaged. He uses a device to communicate. Elendra said nothing. She watched the distant light until it finally went dark. A man who could not speak, a man who helped a servant when no one was watching, a man who walked without the swagger of those seeking to impress. She had touched 47 hands and found only poison. Dawn. She wondered what she would find in his. The next morning, Princess Elindra requested information about the human delegation. Her attendants were confused by the request, but they obeyed. The reports told her little she didn't already know. Earth was young and weak by galactic standards. Their ambassador was competent but desperate for any advantage. Their military was barely worth mentioning, but the report on Lieutenant Daniel Cole made her pause on. He was a translator and cultural expert. He had served on 12 diplomatic missions. In 5 years, 3 of those missions had turned dangerous, and in each case he had helped protect civilian lives before. His own, on the last mission, an explosion had caught him while he was carrying a local child to safety. The child survived without injury. Daniel's voice did not. He had received no medals. For this, he had not asked for any. Alandra sent down the report. Her people judged worth by power and lineage. Humans, it seemed, judged worth by something else entirely. She found him in the Whispering Gardens that afternoon. It was a place few visitors discovered, hidden behind the main palace grounds. Ancient trees with silver leaves created a canopy that filtered the light into soft patterns. The garden got its name from the way the wind moved through those leaves, creating sounds almost like voices. Daniel sat on a stone bench, his data pad on his lap. He was writing something, his expression peaceful. Alendra had removed her royal jewelry and dressed simply as she had in the library. She approached quietly, but he sensed her presence and looked up. His face brightened when he saw her. He typed quickly, "The woman from the library. I hoped I would see you again." She sat beside him, closer than propriety usually allowed. "What are you writing?" He showed her the screen. It was a poem, rough and unfinished, describing the garden in simple words. "You write poetry?" she asked. He typed, "I try. I'm not very good, but this place deserves words, even ones. May I read what you have?" He hesitated, then handed her the data pad. She read slowly. The poem was indeed simple, but there was something honest in it. He wrote about beauty as something to be protected, not possessed. He wrote about silence as a gift, not a weakness. "This is not poor," she said softly. "This is true." He took the data pad back and typed, "You are kind, but I know my limits. Do you?" Most beings never learn their limits. They believe themselves infinite until they break. He considered this, then typed, "I broke once on a mission that went wrong. I learned that I am very small and very fragile, but I also learned that small things can still matter. The child you saved." His eyes widened. He typed, "How do you know about that?" Alindra realized her mistake. A simple servant or scholar would have no access to such information. She had revealed too much. "I heard about it," she said carefully. Daniel studied her face. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he typed, "You're not a scholar, are you?" "No." "Are you someone important?" She could have lied. She wanted to lie to keep this simple connection alive for just a little longer, but she found that she couldn't. "I am Princess Alandra." She watched his face change. She expected him to become nervous, to start apologizing, to transform into another person seeking her favor. That was what always happened when people learned who she was, but Daniel did something unexpected. He simply nodded, then typed, "I thought you might be. You carry yourself like someone with heavy responsibilities." "You're not surprised." He typed a little. "But it doesn't change anything. You were kind to me in the library. That's what I remember. Most would try to impress me. Now to win my favor." He typed, "I don't want your favor. I wanted conversation. That's all I ever wanted." Aura felt something crack inside her chest. For years, everyone had wanted something from her: power, influence, alliance. This man wanted only to talk. "I have a gift," she said quietly. "I can sense the truth of someone's heart through touch. That's how I know when the suitors lie." Daniel nodded. He typed, "I've read about it. It must be exhausting, feeling everyone's hidden Darkness it is, I'm sorry, too simple. Words, not an attempt to use her gift. Not a request for proof, just sympathy. For her burden, Elindra reached out her hand. May I? Daniel looked at her palm. Understanding what she was asking, he hesitated only a moment before placing his hand in hers. The connection was immediate. Elindra gasped as his emotions flooded into her. She felt loneliness deep and old from a childhood spent moving between worlds. She felt quiet sorrow for his lost voice. She felt love for his family back on Earth, worry for colleagues he cared about, and gentle appreciation for the beauty of this garden. But beneath all of that, she found something she had never felt in 47 Suitors. Nothing dark. No ambition for power, no hidden cruelty, no desire to use or control, no contempt for those beneath him. Just kindness, simple, stubborn, unshakable kindness. She pulled her hand back, trembling. Her eyes were wet with tears. She couldn't explain. Daniel looked alarmed. He typed frantically, "I'm sorry, did I hurt you? I didn't mean to offend." "No," she whispered, "no. You didn't hurt me. Then why are you crying?" She looked at him, this quiet human with no voice and no power and no idea how rare he was, because in 3,000 years of selection ceremonies, you are the first person whose heart was clean. Daniel stared at her. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what this meant, but Elindra knew she had finally found someone worth choosing, and that choice would shake the galaxy to its core. 3 days passed and the rejections continued. Prince Malder of the Vendari hegemony offered 1,000 years of peace. Princess Elindra touched his hand and found plans for conquest hidden beneath his smile. Rejected Duke Severine of the Outer Rim brought jewels that could power a city for centuries. She sensed his cruelty toward those who served him. Rejected Lord Cassian of the Merchant Guilds promised prosperity beyond imagination. She felt his willingness to sell anything, including people, for profit. Rejected. The great hall filled with whisper. 47 suitors in previous cycles, and now 12 more in 3 days. Some began to call her impossible. Others said she was weakening her empire with her refusals. A few suggested that no one would ever be good enough for the Valoran princess. Ambassador Patricia Lane watched from the human section with growing concern. "This is becoming dangerous," she said quietly to Commander Gregory Shaw. "The rejected suitors are angry. They're starting to talk to each other." Gregory nodded. Kthvari Prince has been meeting with the Morvaxian Duke. That's not a combination I like. Should we leave early? It might be wise. We've learned what we came to learn. These people have problems that are much bigger than Earth. Daniel Cole had been listening. He typed on his data pad and showed it to Patricia. "If we leave early, it will look like we are afraid, or worse, like we don't respect their traditions." Patricia sighed. "Daniel, I appreciate your thoughts, but we're not important here. No one will notice if we go." He typed again. "Servant I help noticed. Sometimes the small things matter." Gregory shook his head. "Idealism doesn't stop warships." "Lieutenant," Daniel had no answer for that. He simply returned to his observation of the ceremony. That afternoon, the rejections paused for a traditional feast. All delegations gathered in the great dining hall. The tables were arranged by species, with the most powerful closest to the imperial family. Earth's table was near the back, close to the servants' entrance. Daniel Did not mind. From here he could watch everything without being watched. Himself, he noticed the young servant. From before, the one who had dropped the cubs. The child was working again, carrying trays of food between tables. The boy moved carefully, clearly, terrified of making another mistake. One of the Kathvaria officers stuck out his foot as the servant passed. The boy tripped and nearly fell, catching himself just in time. The officer laughed. His companions laughed with him. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest, but he stayed still. Causing a scene would help no one. The servant continued his work, head down, shoulders tight with fear. When he reached the human table, Daniel caught his eye and smiled. He typed quickly and showed his screen. You're doing well, stay strong. The boy's eyes widened. He nodded quickly and hurried on, but Daniel saw his shoulders relaxed just a little. Across the hall, Princess Elandra sat beside her father. She had seen the Kathvari officer's cruelty. She had seen the other delegations ignore it, and she had seen the human with the silent voice offer comfort to a frightened child. Twice now, twice she had watched him choose kindness when no one was looking. Elindra, her father said quietly, "You seem distracted." "I am thinking, father, about the suitors. They grow impatient. Let them. I will not bind myself to poison just to make them comfortable." Emperor Valdro sighed. "Your gift is powerful, daughter, but sometimes I wonder if it is also a curse. You see too much. Would you have me see less? Would you have me choose blindly? I would have you choose. The Empire needs this alliance." Elindra looked at her father with sad eyes. "And if there is no one worth choosing?" The Emperor had no answer. That evening Daniel asked Ambassador Lane for permission to visit the palace library. She agreed, mostly because she wanted him away from any potential conflict. The Kavari delegation had been sending dark looks toward all the minor species. The library was enormous. Its shelves reached so high that floating platforms were needed to reach the upper levels. Books, scrolls, and data crystals filled every space. Daniel had never seen anything so beautiful. He found a section on Valoran poetry and began to read. The language was complex, but he had always been good with words. Even without his voice, he could still appreciate their beauty. He was so focused on his reading that he didn't notice someone approaching. "You can read Old Valoran?" Daniel looked up. A young woman stood before him, dressed in simple robes. Her skin was pale violet, her hair silver, but without the elaborate styling of nobility. He assumed she was a scholar or perhaps senior servant. He typed on his data pad a little. "I'm still learning. The poetry is beautiful." The woman tilted her head. "Most visitors have no interest in our poetry. They want to know about our weapons or our wealth." He typed, "Weapons and wealth don't tell you who people really are. Stories and poems do." Something shifted in her expression. She sat down across from him. "That's an unusual thing for a human to say. Your species is known for its aggression." He smiled and typed, "My species is known for many things, some true, some not. We are complicated like everyone else." "You don't speak." It wasn't a question, but Daniel answered anyway. "My voice was damaged. It's healing, but slowly for now I write." "Does it frustrate you being unable to speak?" He thought about this for a moment, then typed, "Sometimes. But I've learned that listening is more important than talking. Most people talk too much and hear too little." The woman laughed softly. It was a warm sound, unexpected from someone who seemed so serious. They talked for over an hour. She asked about Earth, about human culture, about his life. He asked about valor and history, about the meaning behind certain poems, about her favorite stories. Neither asked for anything. Neither tried to impress the other. When it was time to go, Daniel typed one last message. Thank you for talking with me. I don't get many chances to just talk anymore. Nor do I, she said. Quietly she left first. Daniel stayed in the library a while longer, smiling at the strange and wonderful conversation. He never asked her name, and she never told him who she really was. But Princess Elindra walked back to her chambers with something new in her heart. For the first time in years she had met someone who treated her like person instead of a prize. She needed to know more about this silent human. She needed to know what hid inside his heart. The Imperial Council chamber fell silent when Princess Elindra made her announcement. I have made my choice, she said, her voice clear and strong. I choose Lieutenant Daniel Cole of the Earth delegation. For 3 heartbeats no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Prince Vorath of the Kathvari was the first to speak. His roar shook the walls. A human, you reject the heirs of 12 great empires for a creature from a primitive world. Duke Severin slammed his fist on the table. This is an insult to every species present. Humans are barely capable of leaving their own solar system. They have no power, no influence, no worth. The other rejected suitors joined the outcry. Accusations flew through the air like weapons. Some called the princess mad, others called her a fool. A few suggested she was trying to destroy her own empire. Emperor Valdos raised his hand for silence. It took several minutes for the room to obey. Daughter, he said carefully, this choice is unexpected. The human is not even a suitor candidate. He is support staff. I know, father, you would bind our empire to a species that cannot protect itself. Elandra stood tall. I would bind myself to a man whose heart is worthy. Is that not the purpose of the selection? To find someone true, man who cannot even speak. Prince Vorath sneered. How fitting. The Valoran princess chooses a maid who is literally voiceless. Perhaps she wants someone who cannot argue with her. He speaks, Elendra said coldly, just not with words, and what he says is more truthful than anything that has come from your mouth. Prince Vorath, the Kithvari prince's scales flushed dark with rage. You dare? I dare tell you what I sensed when I touched your hand. Shall I share it with the council? Shall I describe the contempt you feel for species you consider weak, the plans you've made to use a marriage alliance to position your forces for conquest? Vorath went very still. Or perhaps Duke Sever would like me to describe his thoughts. Pleasure he takes in causing pain to those who serve him. The Marvaxian Duke looked away. I have touched the hands of 47 suitors over 3 cycles, Elandra continued. I have felt greed, ambition, cruelty, and hatred hiding behind every smile and every gift. Not one of you came here for me. You came for power. You came to use me as a tool. The chamber was silent now. Daniel Cole did not come here seeking anything. He helped a servant who dropped cups when no one was watching. He sat in our library reading poetry instead of plotting political advantage. When I touched his hand, I felt no darkness at all, only kindness and loneliness and a profound respect for all living beings. Emperor Valdos looked at his daughter. With new understanding, you believe he is true. I know he is true. My gift has never been wrong. In the human delegation's quarters, Ambassador Patricia Lane was trying to process what had just happened. He's not even conscious, she said, staring at Daniel, who sat frozen in shock. Daniel did. You hear me? The princess chose you. Daniel typed slowly on his data pad. There must be a mistake. There's no mistake, Commander Gregory Shaw said. Grimly, I just received word from the council. They're debating whether to accept the choice or declare it invalid. Invalid? Can they do that? The selection has rules, but those rules have never been tested against a situation like this. The other suitors are demanding something called a trial of worth. Daniel typed, what is that? An ancient tradition. If a chosen consort is challenged, they must prove their worthiness through 3 tests. Strength, wisdom, and heart. Patricia put her hand on Daniel's shoulder. You don't have to do this. We can leave. Earth isn't strong enough to force the issue, and no one would blame you for walking away from an impossible situation. Daniel sat quietly for a long moment, then he typed, what happens to the princess if I refuse? Gregory answered reluctantly. Politically, she would be humiliated. Her gift would be questioned. The suitor she rejected would use this as proof that she's unfit to rule, and personally no one had an answer for that. Daniel stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the crystal towers of the palace. Somewhere in there, a woman who could see the truth of hearts had looked at his and found something worth choosing. He didn't understand why he wasn't special, he wasn't powerful, he was just a man who tried to be kind because kindness mattered, but she had believed in him, and if he ran away now he would prove every alien in that council chamber right. He would prove that humans weren't worth respect. He turned back to Patricia and typed, I'll do it. Daniel, the trial of worth is designed for warriors and princes. You're a translator, he typed, then I'll translate. I'll show them what humans mean when we say we're worth knowing. The official response was delivered to the council that evening. Ambassador Lane read it aloud, her voice steady. Despite her fear, listen, Daniel Cole accepts the challenge of the trial of worth. He offers these words to the council, I will try, not for honor, not for power, for her truth to be believed. Prince Voreth smiled a predator's smile. Then let him try and let him fail. But Princess Elindra, standing beside her father's throne, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The human with no voice had chosen to speak for her. Now the galaxy would discover if humanity's quiet strength was real or just a beautiful dream. The arena of judgment was ancient. Its stones had witnessed thousands of trials. Over 3,000 years, champions had fought. Here, heroes had proven themselves. Legends had been born. Now Daniel Cole stood alone on the sand, facing 12 hostile delegations and an empire that doubted him. The stands were full. Every species that had sent a suitor now watched with hungry eyes, waiting for the human to fail. Ambassador Patricia Lane and Commander Gregory Shaw sat in the small section reserved for Earth, their faces tight with worry. Princess Elindra watched from the imperial balcony. Her hands gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. Emperor Vald stood to announce the trial. The challenger faces 3 tests: strength, wisdom, heart. These tests were designed by our ancestors to reveal true worth. Let the first test begin. The sand beneath Daniel's feet shifted. Holographic projectors hummed to life. And suddenly he was standing in a simulated battlefield. Enemy soldiers surrounded him, their weapons aimed at his chest. The rules appeared in the air. Before him, survive, defeat your enemies. Daniel had no weapon. He had no armor. He had only his data pad and his wit. The simulated soldiers advanced. Daniel backed away, looking for options. He was not a fighter. He had never been trained for combat. This test was designed to crush him. Then he saw her. A holographic civilian, a young girl. Cowered behind a broken wall. She was not part of the combat simulation. She was a choice. Daniel understood. He ran toward the girl, putting himself between her and the soldiers. Energy blasts struck the ground around him. One grazed his shoulder, sending real pain through his body. The simulation was not gentle. He reached the girl and covered her with his body. He typed rapidly on his data pad and held it up toward the nearest soldier. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to protect. Soldiers fired again. Daniel didn't move. He stayed over the girl, taking the hits, refusing to strike back. Simulation flickered and stopped. Emperor Valdra's voice echoed through the arena. The ancient texts state that the test of strength measures not violence but what one fights for. The human chose protection over victory. The test is passed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Prince Vorith's jaw tightened with anger. The second test, the Emperor announced wisdom. The arena transformed into a simple room with 12 chairs. Arranged in a circle, representatives from each species appeared, some holographic, some real. Each would ask one question. Daniel had to answer. The Kithvari representative went first. Why should any species fear humanity? Daniel typed and showed his answer. You shouldn't fear us. Fear makes enemies. We would rather make friends. Morvaxian spoke next. Your species has known war throughout its history. How can you claim to value peace? Daniel typed, we have known war. That's why we understand its cost. Peace is precious because we know what happens without it. A vendor scholar asked, what makes humans worthy of standing among the elder races? Daniel typed, we don't ask to stand above anyone. We just want a chance to stand beside you. Worthiness isn't about being the strongest. It's about trying to be better than you were yesterday. The questions continued. Each one was designed to trap him, to make him say something foolish or arrogant. Each time Daniel answered with simple honesty. Finally, the last questioner spoke. If you could have any power in the galaxy, what would you choose? Daniel paused. This was the trap. Any answer about strength or wealth or influence would prove that aliens right about human ambition. He typed slowly, I would choose the power to heal not bodies but misunderstandings. The power to help people see each other clearly. That's what I've always wanted. Silence filled the arena. The test is passed, Emperor Valdo said. And there was something different in his voice. Now something like respect. The final test. Heart. The arena went dark. When the lights returned, Daniel stood alone on a simple platform. No simulations, no questions, just him and 10,000 watching eyes. The test of heart requires the challenger to speak one truth, not written, spoken from the voice. Daniel felt his chest tighten. His voice was damaged. He could manage a Few words, but they came out broken and rough. He had not spoken aloud in months. The crowd waited, some smirked, expecting him to fail, a man who could not speak, forced to speak. It seemed like cruelty, but Daniel understood the test. Odd, it wasn't about speaking perfectly, it was about speaking at all. It was about having the courage to be vulnerable when everyone was watching. He closed his eyes. He thought about the princes in the library treating him like a person. He thought about the servant boy he had helped. He thought about every small kindness he had ever given or received. He opened his mouth. I am not worthy. The words came out harsh and broken. Each syllable was a struggle of a princess. He paused, gathering strength. But I am worthy of being kind. His voice cracked on the last word. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't strong, but it was true. The arena was absolutely silent. Then Princess Alindra rose from her seat on the imperial balcony. She walked down the long stairs to the arena floor, her silver robes flowing behind her. Every eye followed her. She crossed the sand and stood before Daniel Cole, the silent human who had spoken his truth. She took his hand, not to read him this time, just to hold him. In 3,000 years, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena, no challenger has ever admitted unworthiness while proving it false. Through their actions, the ancient texts say that true worth is found in those who do not seek it. She turned to face the crowd. I made my choice. Now you see why Emperor Valdros rose. The trial of worth is complete. All three tests have been passed. The selection stands. Prince Vora stormed out of the arena, his delegation following. The Morvakian Duke left without a word, but others remained. Some looked at the human with new eyes. A few even nodded in respect. Dodge. Ambassador Patricia Lane was crying. Commander Gregory Shaw stood at attention, pride written across his weathered face. The ceremony ended with Daniel and Alindra standing together in the Whispering Gardens, away from the crowds and the politics. She spoke and he wrote, and somehow they understood each other perfectly. You didn't have to do that, she said. You could have walked away. He typed, you believed in me when you had no reason to. Walking away would have made you wrong. I didn't want you to be wrong. I wasn't wrong, he typed. No, I'm starting to believe that. She laughed soft and warm, like she had in the library when they first met. The galaxy will talk about this for centuries, she said. The princess who chose a human, the translator who couldn't speak. They'll make songs about us, he typed. Will they be good songs? The best ones always are. She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her shoulders. They watched the silver leaves dance in the evening wind. Across the galaxy the story spread, not of a princess who chose a human, but of a princess who finally found someone worth choosing, not of a man who won through strength or cunning, but of a man who won by being kind. And somewhere in the grid records of galactic history, new entry was made. Humanity, it noted, had finally arrived, not with warships, not with wealth. With a quiet man who proved that silence could speak louder than any words.